I'll be honest with you, recording this was a much better idea in principle than I now feel it is, having sat down to actually do it. Anyway, welcome to the video. This will be me documenting the process of restoring an old pewter and plastic Games Workshop Vindicator model that I've had for several years. I originally got it in a charity shop, and its previous owner had treated this very, very badly, likely due to a lack of experience with such models. They'd clearly disregarded the part of the original assembly instructions that tell you to use super glue for the metal parts. It was actually welded together with liberal amounts of polycement. It was a miracle how the metal parts were even staying in place. Some of them were missing, but essentially during taking apart, I'd realized that the polycement had eaten away a lot of the plastic underneath, and it had welded it into a shape that grabbed hold of the metal but wasn't actually adhering to it. And then, of course, this was sealed in place with a very, very thick layer of Dark Angel's green over the top. Of course, the polycement melted a lot of the detail. Luckily, most of that is covered up by the metal parts that can be seen here. I can show you how it melted one of the sides of one of the chimney stacks as well, which was next to, well, I mean, this is after some restoration work, but next to one of the metal plates. This was just welded to it. You can see the bubble from all the melting. I've tried filing it down, but I'm going to need to use some milliput on that as well, or just hope that it's hidden by the position it will be eventually going in. Now, some other quirks that I found with this model that initially I thought may have been just user error when the model was initially assembled. So on the bottom, I have the bottom hatch as well. You can see where the glue has melted the surface. So not only were they liberal with their application of polycement, they also weren't very accurate. One of the nubs here has been melted away. I'll have to replace that with a piece of plasticard. The quirk I mean to talk about is how on the bottom hatch these bolter cupolas were the ones that were glued in place. Now initially I thought this might have been a mistake, but taking a look at a Razorback instruction manual from the period, it does instruct you to glue those to the bottom as well, the flat ones to the top. So maybe in the Vindicator kit this was also done. Nevertheless, I think I'll be making flat plates out of card or plasticard and adding some rivets to put those on the bottom, because I think they'll look somewhat better. I just don't like the look of the bolter cupolas without the bolters, but still with the stock of the bolter, or not the stock, the ammo feed. If this will focus. There you go. Of course, the bolter would sit on top there, and that's the ammo feed. Another issue with the model, of course, is I mean, this can be either one of this can be one of two things, quite honestly. Either the piece was deformed to begin with, or the previous owner, has managed to drop this model onto its cannon piece, demolisher cannon. I have no idea how I'll be straightening this out as of yet, but you can quite clearly see that it is not straight. It's got a pronounced curve deformation to it. I might have to end up replacing the barrel, because grabbing this with a pair of pliers and trying to bend it will not work. I don't happen to have a dowel of appropriate width to try to hammer this back into place. I might have to think of some alternative solution. What I've done so far is essentially started gluing the model together. Now, I have needed to replace some parts. So these mounting points for the grab rails on the old plastic rhinos had mainly snapped off, except this one. So I've replaced the others with 1.5 millimeter thick plasticard rod that I've drilled into the model. Of course, there's no real reason for them to be there, but I feel like the model would just look off if it didn't. I mean, not that that would matter too much, because this will not be a 100% faithful reconstruction of the original model, for reasons that will be explained soon. But essentially, the work on this model has so far involved straightening out a lot of pieces because they were bent, either because the model was dropped or they were slightly warped and the previous owner hadn't gone to the effort of straightening them out before putting them together. I've done some gap filling with milliput so that there weren't obvious gaps where parts should meet, and also here I've pinned, because the height of this half of the plate was shorter than this half, so in order to make sure that the plate was straight, or well, relatively straight compared to the hull, instead of being at an angle, I've had to fill that in with milliput as well. Another part which, regrettably, I have no footage of. I probably should have started doing this, but I hadn't had the idea to do so before I'd done all this, so please excuse me. A part of the back plate of this side panel needed replacing. I've used some red plasticard there of the same width as the plastic, because that part was just welded to the main hull with poly cement, and I couldn't take it apart properly while I was disassembling it for stripping. So this is the model after its constituent parts have been scrubbed 3 times, after spending a cumulative time of over a day in methylated spirits. The metal parts have come pretty clean at this point. I mean, there's still some in there. I might have to do some topical scrubbing, but overall it shouldn't be a problem. That patch of paint just refuses to come off, but it seems to be flush with the surface, and it shouldn't really show up once paint gets on the model. I've not yet attached the chimneys, because as I've already shown, there's still work to be done on them. The sides of some of them are melted, as I've already shown. Of course, the curved tops are all snapped off. Curved tops have all snapped off. to be honest, I've never been that much of a fan of that aspect of the model, and seeing as I have no way of really doing that with plasticard rod, as in recreating the curve, I might have to think of another solution to give an outlet to these chimneys. Another task will involve the driver in the top hatch. The driver itself seems to be in relatively good shape. It will still require some soaking in methylated spirits and some scrubbing, but other than that, it's generally fine. Some mold lines, like on the head, might need further removal. However, the top hatch is in remarkably bad shape. So, I'll try to get some comparison images up in a second, but the assembly for the storm bolter obviously snapped off while it was still in the care of the previous owner of the model. It's been glued back in... I don't know what the previous owner did here, quite honestly. What I can show you is the amount of glue he used has left an impression of the driver's hand on the plastic. So yeah, I don't know what to say about this, honestly. The Stormbolter piece itself was actually missing when I got this model, so I'll be replacing it instead with an Imperial Guard Stormbolter from one of the tank kits that I happen to have lying around. It's roughly from the same era, and it shouldn't look too out of place. Of course, it's a bit more detailed than the Space Marine Stormbolter was, by courtesy of being newer, but it won't look too out of place on this model. But of course, fitting that to this cupola will... It's not a cupola. Fitting that onto this piece will present some challenges. These pieces, which I just didn't have on the model, because they're not glued in place yet, don't really require much work, in all honesty. I just don't want them to be in the way. This requires some mold line removal, like that unsightly one there, but other than that, it should be fine. Now, to show you what I mean with the mounting being glued on wrong, I took a look at my Shelf of Doom and searched through all the Space Marine codices from 3rd edition for reference images of this Vindicator, and the only one I found was in the Dark Angels Codex. On page 16, as you can see, if I get this and move it into frame, the mount of the weapon is supposed to be out and to an angle. It isn't. And this looks like that part glued it upside down, or possibly just the mounting of that rail there. Either way, it's just glued on top over there, and of course the Stormbolter itself is missing. Now, out of curiosity, I also took a look at the 2nd edition of the 3rd edition Dark Angels Codex. It also has the same image of the Vindicator. That's not why I'm showing you this. The interesting thing I found while I was doing this was that the image of the same squad is different in the two codices, because of course the second edition of the third edition codex gave the Dark Angels the option to carry plasma cannons in their tactical squads. But that's just an interesting tidbit I thought I would mention here. Anyway, so the job will be to essentially add an Imperial Guard Stormbolter at the top there. Hopefully that should make it look fine. Another thing that I might have to find a solution for is, of course, these aerials were not in the kit, although I think those are pieces of wire. And that mounting for that aerial, clearly another piece that would glue on there, is something else that I'm missing. So I shall have to think of a solution for that as well. Now, another part, of course, is the Hunter-Killer Missile Pod. Shit. The Hunter-Killer Missile Pod, which was also missing, that I don't have really a replacement for. I think I might just leave it off, because of course it is an optional piece of war gear, and I've not really been a fan of that design of missile launcher ever. That smoke launcher was also missing from the kit, but I do happen to have one lying around somewhere, so if I ever find it, it will be added to the kit. But if I don't, then obviously I don't really think I will. I mean, I could always go the route of adding a modern smoke launcher, but I don't think it would look quite right on this model. Although, I can always try it. The main challenges for this project will be the cannon, the Stormbolter, and finding something appropriate to put on the top of the chimney stacks. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you weren't too bored, and I hope to be able to show off some more progress in another one. I also hope to do some videos on my collection of codices at some point in the future, but will I ever get the motivation to actually go through with it? I don't know. We'll find out. Anyway, goodbye.